Good afternoon. It is wonderful to see you, or good morning, good evening. It depends on when you're watching this and from where you are watching this. It is great to be here with you all again for our monthly interaction, interview, or conversation with exciting people. For you who do not know me, I'm Johan Alexandersson. I am Swedish, but I am based in I'm Harpenden in England, and my companion today is, wherever she is on your screen.
It's Tove Poulsen from Denmark.
Come on.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes, and for you who are new to the ELLC, our European leaders learning community, we are about right now 1,000 plus members, but we want to grow and we want to make available all the wonderful resources we have. For all you YWAMers out there. So please share and like this stream and follow us on Facebook and go to our website where we have a lot of great resources that we want to add to and grow and be a help to the family of God. Anyway, so it's again really good to have you here. Tove, you have a couple of things for us before we start.
Great. And right now, this month, we have a focus on faith and work, and we've had some really good articles already. There's an article by Mark Stewart. He is American, but living in Denmark. And he's talking about his transition from YWAM into a workspace and how he actually struggled, saying that, wow, I thought, the only really important work you can do that is with missions and outreach and so on. So he really struggled to start with, and then how he has moved to a place of really teaching on faith and work and loving it. That transition is what that is about. And then Valesca from Brazil, she has another article on thinking about vocation, where she goes into some of the theology, and just a great article. She has a follow-up article you can follow in there as well. Then we had two amazing LDXs, like short 10-minute talks, 12 minutes I think they ended up on. And Naomi Pons, who is in France, she had a really wonderful one on the essence of work, where she is sharing about her experience, how she's come to understand what work really is about. And she visualized it as a three-legged stool, where each leg represented one of the great callings that we have received as Christians. And one is the Great Commission, the Great Commandment, and then the cultural mandate. So also very deeply personal story. And we have another one that's YWAM to Mainstream Work with Tim Engelmann. Tim is in Germany, and he's been traveling from city to city, meeting up with YWAM alumni, mainstream YWAMers, and also introducing the idea of meeting up in networks like faith and work type networks. So he has so much good experience from there. I really encourage you to use some of these materials in your staff meetings as well. But today's topic, that is life and work and building entrepreneurial capacity. We can also say apostolic capacity, really. As always, we are welcoming you to comment and question, and we will try and bring them in just as we go. So in the studio, we have Hermund Haaland. He's an author. Here we have, coming in from Tønsberg. I think you are there right now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Norway. Yeah. You're married to Linn, and who did her DTS, I believe, and 3 years staffing in Skien. Mm-hmm. And you, I know, have been also shaped, you would say, and envisioned through YWAM. And then you've been spending 10 years pioneering together, Skaberkraft, is type of leadership training and followers of Jesus to engage in all spheres of society in Europe. But we are going to hear much more about that. So, Johan.
Yes, that's very good. So I am a bit interested because I don't know you so well, Hermund, but Tove said here that you've been shaped by YWAM. I think that's something I haven't heard too many times someone explaining someone. So what does that mean? Tell us a bit more, like what's your relationship or your relation to YWAM, and what does that look like for you?
So it started, I know your wife is Canadian, so it started in Canada for me when I was 12, where I picked up my accent. We had a summer in Cambridge, Ontario, where my parents did their Crossroads DTS. And that, of course, blew my mind from being, I mean, people didn't travel the world when I was 12, back in 87. It was rare. So for us 5 boys to fly over to Canada for a summer was amazing. And it globalized me pretty fast. And then it got my parents going. So we sold our house a year later and spent a year in Australia and Hawaii and Kona doing counseling schools. And we kids did the YWAM schools for kids. So that was like mind blowing, knowing God personally, hearing God's voice, worship. I remember we came from a nice evangelical church before the charismatic waves, and to see all these crazy people lifting their hands and dancing and shouting, it was so that was early shaping. And then I did my DTS in Virginia when I was 19 with my outreach, and that was compulsory in our family. And our outreach in Israel, terrible DTS, 7 students, 2 quit. But we had a week with Lana Cope on discipling the nations, and had some amazing leaders. So that got me going into my adulthood, looking for this. What does it look like if the principles in the Bible that I had experienced and have experienced are good for us as individuals, and I've seen it build up, especially our continent, Europe and the Western world. What does it look like today if we're going to bring those values as building bricks in society, and how can we do it in a post-Christian secular world has really been a passion of mine. So YWAM shaped my thinking and didn't give me all the answers though. So that's something to talk about. We had to look elsewhere.
That's good. Give us all the answers. No, that's great.
We're not quite there, but we're in the process.
That's
happy
great
to share my thoughts.
I have another question. Also knowing, so you were described to me as a serial entrepreneur. So all I think about is the Dragon's Den, and about people investing. Could you explain a bit what is it that you do, and what is that? What's a serial entrepreneur or a serial apostolic person, I guess?
Well, I think I started my first business when I was 9. So it's I think for some of us, it's just in our DNA, and we have to create. And I look at my legacy, my forefathers, some of them were founders as well. And so I've started several things. I've never become really rich. So I'm more like a serial social entrepreneur, probably, with starting a newspaper when I was a kid. I started some initiatives in my teens. And then in my 20s, I started a business while I was studying, a tech business, web before the web really was commercialized. And then I started another web company, or a subsidiary for a Norwegian startup in Sweden, in Gothenburg, in your area actually. And then I saw that Norway was too depending on oil. Now we're really aware of it, but 15 years ago we didn't talk much about it. So I pushed that into the discussions on the western parts of Norway, where we had an entrepreneurial conference for the western region of Norway. So, and then the think tank that we'll come back to was my longest startup. I spent 10 years building a think tank, and now a new initiative. So I guess it's just in me that I have to start great stuff. Can't quit. Addicted.
Yeah. So with that, what is it? So starting from so young, what's the passion? What's the engine or the drive that just keeps it going and keeps it coming?
Well, I think that innate, there's this drive to just create and put an idea into reality and see it come alive, which is the inner drive. But then adding to when I had these personal encounters with Jesus in my teens, it was combining those. That my drive now is to see His kingdom come into life in every area of life. Because I think that's a different topic, but it's part of it that I burnt my finger in the church to a degree where where I thought, God didn't create us to be in a bubble. That's not life. So there's got to be, it has to work outside the bubble as well. Otherwise, I'd rather quit and have fun. So
excellent. That's like a sweet music to my ears as well. With all the things that you've created, I kind of want to know, how old are you? It sounds like a legacy of an 80-year-old,
Okay, I'm 46, but I had the price was 2 burnouts. That's worth talking about too.
Okay.
And I would, it could happen again if I'm not careful. It's I'm on overdrive sometimes.
Yeah. That's another topic and a good one. But you mentioned Skaberkraft, and I know that would be very well known, I think, in Norway. Just please talk to us. I mean, what exactly is it? You stuck with it. It's your baby. You stuck with it for 10 years and really build it up. But what is it about?
So the think tank concept was pretty new in Norway and to some degree in Scandinavia. It started, the think tank idea came into to being in America in the 1950s, actually in the military, where they realized there was a group thinking, which is it's a concept from organizational theory, that if you're in a certain group like YWAM, you can start thinking the same thoughts in circle and you don't have fresh new thoughts. So they realized in order to have other smart heads thinking about military strategy, they had to build a new group of people. So they built a tank because they had to safeguard it from probably Russian spies. But so the think tank came into being, and then that spread around the world to also in the world of politics, where especially as the media has become more and more tabloid, and politicians don't have time, and political parties don't have the same time as they used to think deep thoughts and to think new policies in peace and quiet, and then bring it out to their electorate. So this concept grew into politics, and now there's a number of political think tanks from left to right, and a number of us with a background in the Christian Democratic Party in Norway realized maybe it's a smart idea to have a Christian think tank to bring out the values from the Bible in a relevant, wise, smart way. Also, not. We saw a lot of people who were lifting up the name of Jesus and God in the public were often on the extremes, because that's fun for the journalists to bring in the extreme voices. But we realized, especially for the young generation, we need to bring in voices that they can be proud of and look up to, and be proud of that we are believers, we're Christians, and these guys are bringing these values into the public domain in a way that we can be proud of. So that was the fuel for building Skaberkraft as a think tank in Norway. And so we decided to not just go for pushing the abortion debate or talking about marriage, which is often what Christians come across as interested in, as if God is only interested in marriage and only interested in abortion. But so we've had a number of issues that we raised, obviously, like human trafficking. That's something that young people around the world in Europe are engaged in as believers. That's one topic we touched on, child poverty, but also entrepreneurship. For Norway's sake, we need to focus on creating the new jobs after our oil, and as we have the green shift. What does that look like? We had books on the founding fathers of the EU. So to sum it up, we launched that book on the founding fathers of the EU together with the European movement, a secular European movement that has been in Europe since 1948, I think. And one of the major editors was invited to host or to moderate our launch with. So we had a dinner at the European Union's ambassador to Norway, so a few of us. And this editor said, "So Hermund, Skaberkraft, you're a Christian think tank, but I can't put you in a box. Well, what are you actually?" Mm-hmm. So we felt we achieved what we wanted to surprise the public, that they couldn't put us in a box. But we had a number of interests. And I think that was our desire to portray God as bigger and broader than the public perceives him to be. Yeah, that was a long
No,
answer.
No, that's excellent. I think it's fascinating that you as a Norwegian are launching a book, on the fathers of EU, in a sense. So I guess you also celebrated the Europe Day, on Monday.
Yeah, and that book was actually, it's been translated to more than 10 languages. And yesterday it was launched in Polish. So I'll show you the English version in a bit.
Beautiful, beautiful. Great. So you had people in from all kinds of walks, I would imagine, in that Skaberkraft.
But we didn't grow that big. So, I mean, we had 4 or 5 employees full-time because we didn't have the rich uncles as in America, but we had, finally, we found 1,000 individuals sponsoring us. So it took 10 years to build that, but we had some impact, yeah.
Fantastic. And now you're onto something new.
Indeed. So the only reason I left Skaberkraft was that we realized as a founder, sometimes you stick with it for life, but in this case, I was constantly drawn back to fix and be part of solving things in Norway, and I never got to do what I was really feeling called to look at Europe and the world to, one, empower young leaders to follow Jesus and influence the spheres of society. I would add, for the common good, not just for Christian values, but for the common good. And then secondly, to empower more young people to step up and get a voice in the public area. It feels like, as an example on this, it feels like in a country like Norway, where you have 5 million people, it's almost like a dinner table. We have somewhere between 10 and 20,000 people who are all constantly engaged in the discussions in the public on what the future of Norway is. And for Europe, those numbers will be higher. But I think sometimes the Christians, say in America, come across as like, we want to control this table. I don't think that's the Jesus way. It's more to serve. But what I saw was that there were too few believers around that table, that virtual table. So I think we should have a common strategy, not to take over the world, but to serve, but to step up. And that's related to what you called, we talked about, Tove, the cultural mandate, to be part of taking leadership for our societies. So in order to do that, I had to, with my wife, we had to start something new. So I'll share the screen briefly and show you. Maybe it shows the new concept that we're doing, Zebr Institute, which is basically the same as Skaberkraft, but in a more agile, lighter version. So that's what we're doing. It's going to be focusing on empowering young leaders around Europe, predominantly, to look at how they lead themselves, lead others, and take initiative in their careers and in their places of leadership to shape our future for the common good. And then secondly, to step up and understand how to put their ideas into writing. So we created a blog magazine that we hope to build as a digital magazine called Zebr Magazine. So that's what we're seeing, the small beginnings. We had 15 participants from 9 countries with our second year of our leadership program this year. And we have about an article a week coming out of the Zebr Magazine at the moment. So that's super fun.
Yeah.
And there's a story behind it. So if I have time for that story.
We have to ask, I mean, zebra in Norway. What? Tell us.
So the fun thing is, actually, it was about half a year before my wife and I both understood that we need to leave Skaberkraft to get into Europe. So we had a sense, let's involve the kids, and we just thought, what if we start something with the kids to teach them to be more entrepreneurial? So we sat them around a table for dinner and said, why don't we do this? And they said, sure, great. And one kid wanted to sell pancakes, and one wanted to sell juice and stuff, and great, but that will change over the years. And then we had a prayer together saying, God, would you give us an idea of what to call ourselves? And then our 5-year-old at that time, Jacob, he said after like a few seconds almost, we should call ourselves Zebr, which is French for zebra, because he has this book that has been starting to practice French, and he loves zebras. So that's what he thought. So I think we thought that sounds cool, and then we thought about a website, and we took away the E and it became Zebr because it looked cooler. But then 2 days later, a friend of mine that I had gone to Bible school with in South Africa, he moved to Norway and he started to paint animals. So we saw this beautiful painting that he created, a huge painting with a mother zebra and a child zebra, that he said, whoever buys this can buy it for half price. It was quite expensive. So yeah, that was good. We bought that. And then thirdly, we realized, I had read a story in a Norwegian newspaper a year ago about zebra startups. And then I realized, I Googled it, and there are quite a lot about it, because there's a movement in the startup world where you talk about new businesses. Everyone is frantically building unicorns, where it's all about becoming worth $1 billion as fast as possible. And those countries with the most unicorns do best in the startup world. So, which is good. I mean, to some degree, it's good. But when you grow that fast, you sometimes lose your values. So this zebra startup movement is about caring for the flock. That's what zebras do. And you have two colors, black and white. So the idea is to be profitable. But the other idea is to have a mission for good. So as we as we're communicating with the secular world, Zebr then works really well into this picture. That's exactly what we're looking to build. Entrepreneurial young leaders thinking like an entrepreneur in all fields of society, working for the common good, and we add Jesus in the mix. There you go. So I think my 5-year-old heard from the Lord. That was very encouraging.
That's amazing.
So good.
So you just started, is that a year ago?
A year ago, yeah.
Yeah.
So can I ask that? Just mentioning about young people and wanting to see young people be more entrepreneurial. Do I pronounce the word right? I should have
yeah.
the word entrepreneur before. But just maybe it's a little bit of a side question to this. But just what is it that you see that continuously need to be encouraged for young entrepreneurs, or to pull that out for young people to be entrepreneurial? Does that make sense? Like, what you see the need is, or maybe what is it that hinders young people from stepping out in that or seeing that? Any reflections on that?
Yeah, I think it has to do with our culture partly. Obviously, on a micro level, it depends what family you're from. So, for example, looking at America again, I think the culture in America is more entrepreneurial. There's a more incentive, a stronger incentive from childhood to be more creative, daring, and speak out and take initiative. But you can have families that don't encourage that in America as much as in Europe. But I talked to an official in the DG Enterprise, which is like the Department of Enterprise or Business in the European Union. It was 10 years ago, but I think his analysis of the situation in Europe was quite accurate. He said, for generations, we've been training Europeans to apply for jobs in the public sector or in the big corporations. That's kind of a safety net. So I think in looking now, then early 2000, 40 of the biggest 100 companies in the world were European. Now that number is down to 18. So we're kind of losing traction compared to China and America on the business level. Yeah. But it says something about our culture that we need to somehow encourage and empower young people. And what's fun, my wife is dreaming about doing something for kids. I think we need to start with the kids even, but at least for us now, we can start with the young adults from age 21 to 26 and try to kind of dig forth that creativity again and the courage. I think those two. Most people can be more entrepreneurial. Not everyone can be a serial entrepreneur and take initiative, but I think everyone can be more creative and be more courageous to take initiative. And that's what we kind of mean by being entrepreneurial in that sense.
with the risk of oversimplifying an issue, but for the sake of discussion or conversation, could you identify what do you think it is in European culture, or I mean that's very broad, but that has changed that caused that to be a little bit less?
Well, I mean, obviously in Eastern Europe, communism didn't do any good, but in Western Europe, well, I think there's a backside to the welfare state that has been built since the Second World War. The good thing is that it actually creates a safety net around us, and which is most of the time it's good, but it has probably put us in Denmark you have the Jante law where you shouldn't stick your head off. In Sweden too, and in Norway, and I think most of Europe. I think we need to work against that and have a new wave of creativity. Like Europe was built on creativity and innovation, but we somehow lost our edge, and we need to reconnect with it. And that's not going to be done as wirewormers. We think short-term mission, short-term. Now it's going to take decades, but we need to start somewhere. And it's I didn't bring that, but I wrote 2 books on the startup scenes in Europe and Israel, Startup Europe and Startup Israel, back in 2016 and 17. There's a lot of good things happening around the capitals of Europe. In the startup scene, is called the ecosystems for entrepreneurial, especially tech businesses. So the answer for that is to be part of that that cultural change that they're pushing through. And that was one thing that I observed traveling in Europe at that point in 2016. That I didn't find a lot of believers there either, in those environments where they start new businesses in the hubs and the co-working spaces. So if I'm going to tease our wirewormer friends, it's wonderful that we're starting to learn how to be baristas and start coffee bars, but it's not enough. We need to step up and take it one step further and be part of the tech scenes in the hubs and the co-working spaces around Europe.
Yeah, that's very good.
Great. So how do you think, how can we build, within churches as well, within YWAM, like increase our capacity for entrepreneurial, startups and apostolic, you can say, that goes together, increase the capacity for more apostolic initiatives?
Well, I think one of our in the business world, we talk about, for example, the SWOT analysis, our strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, and the strength that YWAM has, it can sometimes be a weakness where we just start things and we don't think how we're going to structure this and see it through. But the strong side of it, I would say, YWAM is quite entrepreneurial at heart. So what might be lacking is to add knowledge and capacity and capabilities from other, increasing our understanding that knowledge and education and knowledge found elsewhere than in our Bible-focused sphere is an important asset to add to our entrepreneurial love for Jesus. So that's one thing. And then if we do, as we're talking about in this process, see how we can introduce this concept of faith and work, and see that following Jesus as disciples is not related only to being a full-time wirewormer or full-time missionary, but bringing that DNA of following Jesus wholeheartedly into all the areas of life. I think we can see more. Okay, let's put it that way. It's wonderful to see these coffee bars popping out of YWAM people, but I think we could see more tech businesses and more other types of businesses and more YWAM politicians and more YWAM professors, not calling themselves YWAMers, but calling themselves followers of Jesus out there, but connected to YWAM, really influencing society in the years to come.
Yeah. So without being, what do you say? What would you, if there's anything having some relation with YWAM, what can we do differently? Or how do we inspire for that or encourage that? Is there anything, if you're going to be real blunt, is there anything that you're like, YWAM, you're terrible at this, and this is why you don't go beyond a coffee bar. Like, this is why we don't go into these spheres,
Yeah, sure, but at the same time, we didn't have the coffee bars 10 years ago, so it's a step in the right direction. There's a good movement here, but to go beyond is to widen our perspective for what it is to build the kingdom. I don't even like the term "build the kingdom" because the kingdom is God is holding this kingdom himself, but to carry the kingdom or to walk in the kingdom principles and to live it out. So I think the rather than saying there's something wrong with YWAM, I think the basis is laid. Now let's just build on that, take the next step, and encourage and empower and show examples of what it looks like to be a follower in the different areas and to be in those areas with excellence. So maybe I'm talking around the circle here, but maybe one thing we need to say is that and this is a challenge for all believers, I think, and for all, especially charismatic Christians, that the way we portray devotion to the Lord should be broadened so that now it seems like if you're a preacher or a worship leader or a missionary in YWAM, then you are at the top of the pyramid of spirituality. But I think we need to change that perspective and say, if you're the best engineer you could be or the best nurse you could be, and you do that wholeheartedly for the Lord and with the Lord, then that's as spiritual as being on the scene in a church or in a YWAM base. I think that's a switch that we need to make to show that that spirituality doesn't look just in one way. And the Hebrew word for work, I think it's kavod. It's the same, or for worship is the same word for work. So that we can switch our mindset. Worship is not just having a strong encounter with the Lord, praising him with our singing, but it's doing great work at work.
Yeah, that's very good. And I think
so
also
with that,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just with that, I hear you basically saying we need to change, or we need to increase or broaden our theology.
Theology and thinking, right? and our role and the way we portray it. Although YWAM has been cutting edge in many ways in the church, we're still very much in the spheres concept. We're still very much showing forth the church sphere through our YWAM activities. 95% of our activities, or maybe you can add something for caring for the poor, like the mercy work and building orphanages and stuff. But that's where we are, and we need to just broaden that. And blow up those walls, basically. And that, if we're serious about that, that's going to take some bombing of walls.
Yeah. No, because
and some people might be offended as we tear down some walls.
It's always necessary. Offense, what is it? I'm not going to go down that route. But I think because you said the thing about how we see that worship leader, pastor, that's a higher. And I think depending on what culture you're in YWAM, the culture I grew up in YWAM, that would always be worked against. That we don't want to limit what's spiritual to worship leader and pastor. But my thought is also it continues to happen because we are limited in our expression to churchmen. So we are producing good pastors and worship leaders because that's the limitation of our expression. So even if that's not necessarily what we value, I guess you can argue what comes first, what you do or what you believe. But like, how do we shake ourselves, or how do we find that way where we do blow up those walls or becomes a bit more edgy? And that's what
Well, this is interesting because I think if you look historically, Christians were building hospitals and businesses and universities. So the question is, should we copy that today? As I look at the resources of the church and of YWAM, I mean, we have the University of the Nations, so why not improve that? But I'm not sure if it's necessary to rebuild the best or start new universities to rebuild the universities of Europe. But I think the starting point would have to be to equip and release our people to get out of the church boat to with a clear mission out in the world, but to build networks so that we keep together, yet we are really going for it. So I think if we look at any continent, but if you look at Europe, I'm sure you find thousands of people with a YWAM background working in all directions of life, but they're not connected to one another. They're not connected to YWAM anymore. And statistics from America at least shows that we're in general losing 60 to 70% of kids growing up in Christian families are no longer active in a church fellowship when they're 30 and 40. So we don't know exact numbers, but I'm pretty sure then that a huge number of ex-YWAMers are not, one, living with the Lord, and secondly, are not in fellowship, or one of the two. So how do we think the next 30, 40, 50 years, how can we turn that around to have a dynamic community for believers and YWAMers to stay connected, yet being out there with a purpose, to have the cultural mandate as one of their motivations and not just be part of the professional culture in their sphere without thinking how they can influence it. That's where I'm feeling a lot of my the older generations that are believers have disconnected their YWAM experience or their church experience from what they do, because that's on Sunday and that's how we do it in the financial sector or in academia. Well, I think you can connect it, but that's maybe what we can do as YWAM, is, if I say we, is to connect those dots and create the networks.
That's great. You're very welcome to say we. That's really good. So just say a bit more. What do you think? What is it then that we could contribute as YWAM? Since we want to be in the spheres, but we have the limitation because I cannot work a business and be a YWAM community, but I still want to have an impact in it. So what, in your opinion, is it that YWAM can contribute to, I don't know, the Christian business community or YWAMers in business or in entrepreneurship?
So I think we could think strategically about what the DTS and our schools look like. If there's something we could add to the mix to create those kingdom-oriented business people and nurses and professors in the future. And I don't have all the answers to that, but we definitely have to look at the curriculum and see if we're actually producing what we want to see produced by our YWAM initiatives. So in that way, I think YWAM can be seen as the same way as a church, that our role is not to be the best. We can't be the Department of Physics, we can't be the Department of Medicine or business, but we can put stuff into our DNA, and we can bring in people with the connection, with the combination of faith and various expertise to teach young people, to give them the stimulus to walk this way. And I think, secondly, we could create the networks and create the fellowship and be part of that for the future, to make sure that when we send people out into society, they have fellowship with one another, to have that strength to think differently about what it looks like in the spheres 20 years from now. So I would say it's a bit of a slow work, but I would say that starting with the DTS, looking at, okay, 95% of DTS students will not be in missions or be pastors. They will go into the real world. Are we giving them the right content for that mission? Or are we giving them a great missions experience with outreach to Cambodia, but we're not giving them anything to work in McKinsey or to work in an academic world afterwards?
That's a very good point, and that's like a conversation I've been a part of for a while, as to how do we better celebrate the vocation and calling of all our DTS students, the graduates, as well as staff that are leaving, because I think it's the statistics show that like the average staff member stays on for 1.5 years, so they're also heading out, for regular.
So in that sense, we need to think of how we equip our staff. But for those staying on staff for 10 or 20 or 30 years for life, like pastors in the church, which some people are called to, which is great. I think that I'm not challenging them to think that they have to be experts in all these different fields, but just to increase this understanding of what they're equipping the others to do. Not just to preach or evangelize and pray for the sick, but also to think kingdomly on these. So it's not either or, it's both, and to increase rather than because some pastors and I would say probably then some YWAM leaders will be challenged. Am I not good enough? Haven't it been good enough what we've done for the last 50 years? No, sure, but let's take it one step further. Let's increase our efficiency and fruits.
That's very good. We want all DTS students or graduates, to be celebrated and equipped is after. And we've been talking about creating some networks, that we can put, point them toward afterwards, so they are not just left, Of course, they can go back to the churches, but we want to take them further to think broader. So it's brilliant. Now I want to play the devil's advocate a little bit, or the base leader's devil's advocate. I don't know. Because right now, Johan, he's the base leader, one of the base leaders of a large campus. And reality is, if you're running a big place, a big base or campus, you need all kinds of people, and the more skilled, the better. So I would imagine that if a brilliant accountant come in the DCS, he would have his ears out and fingers like, oh man, we need somebody in accounting, and the temptation would be to draw that person in, right? I mean, can we take this conversation further, Johan? There is a real tension there.
No, I agree. It's a tension. I don't know what to add to that other than, yes, of course, it's always, you want the people, and but you also want to release them. Yes.
I had the same conversation in a session with some Christian leaders in Berlin a couple of years ago, and a top leader of Hillsong in Europe said the same. Sometimes when I send the best young lead types to politics or business, I don't see them again. But I honestly think there has to be a balance. I mean, and this is then, in one way, it's resource management, that we have to figure out how much resources do we need to run our basic church or YWAM structures? How excellent or how strong should they be compared to sending the best people out in the world? And there could be a mix, of course. I think if you look at my wife, for example, she said she would never have been as rooted. She came from a nominal believing family and really had an encounter with Jesus when she came to DTS, and she was super happy that she spent 3 years on staff before she left. So I think you could pick up that accountant. But what I see a number of times is that, and here's a very concrete example, especially students coming to big cities, they are engaged in church and they're talented. So the pastors recruit them for different ministries. But then the missing link is when they draw near to their end of their studies, their master's is about to finish and they're about to enter working life. A lot of these people feel a tension between keeping up that pace in church and entering a new phase. I think we can be smarter at helping the individual finding out their seasonal calling. So you can be part of building the structure in YWAM for a few years, and then we need to figure out, are you called to this for long term, or do we need to release you and trust the Lord to send us a new accountant? Which is the hard, I totally understand. But if we're going to have impact in society, we need to make sure that we don't burn out people, keeping them 3 years too long, and they burn out and lose their faith, and they're no good afterwards.
Yeah, it's very good. I mean, it sounds like as simple as you just need to keep on having vision, otherwise you perish. It's kind of right, and giving them vision and letting them move on. And obviously, you never want to carry someone longer than you need to here either. In that sense.
No, and then there's a whole discussion about I think even for people working full-time in ministry, most of their life, it might be good to have a few years to get other types of input and be in the real world, and then come back on staff. So if we can better coach people in and out, I think honestly it will bring people back to want to be part of a community that is caring for them and not just the needs of the base or the church.
Now you use the word coach there, just to latch onto that, because I know that part of what you're doing and what you did also with Skaberkraft, but what you want to be doing is to disciple some key young leaders in different spheres of societies. What is it that you do with them? What is it you invite them into?
So for 10 years now, we've had a leadership program where we invited young, talented leaders from between the age of 21 to 26 from all around Norway. And it became a thing where talented young people who many times didn't feel like they were equipped in church to do this, found a space where we talked about how to lead yourself, lead others, lead in society, and be focused on the principles of Jesus in doing so. These people are talented and will reach far in any case, but we saw that they did not get the connection to their faith in a good way in their churches. And I hope this spills back to the church, and I think it does more and more. But it allows them to meet equally talented with faith on a national level. So now we're doing the same thing in Europe, and with our new institute, we will have more time to go a bit deeper with them, and maybe even grow this from what it is today with 4 weekends and some small groups and mentoring throughout the year to we're looking at it could go into a year program with internships and I know there's a YWAM base in Finland that is thinking along the same lines. So who knows if we can collaborate? We're in touch, and we'll see. The point is to pick up those talents and help them connect the dots and connect them to peers that are thinking the same way. So rather than, and this is maybe a lesson for YWAM, rather than just saying, great, you've done the program, bye-bye, good luck. We're building brick by brick to create the community of friends around them. We're calling them back to gatherings and events so that they get to know the next year cohort. And the dream is to see 100, 200, 300 young leaders stepping into various positions, and that they can support each other in keeping their faith and the kingdom thinking as they enter into positions. So it's not up to us to decide whether we'll see a prime minister or the new corporate leader of a big oil company, or not oil anymore, windmill company. But we at least lay the foundations that it's possible to step in and keep their faith in the process.
Excellent.
So
I mean, in case there's any of our viewers, if you have questions or comments, then please type them up, and we will try and incorporate them.
And in the meantime, also, if at the moment we're recruiting for next year, and we only have space for 15. We don't want to have too many. And these guys can be like this year. We had a Danish young politician who used to lead a party, youth party, and now he's in the business world. We had a PhD student from Lisbon, and we had a nurse who is starting a social entrepreneurial entity in Belgium. So it's that leader skill doesn't have to be from a business school. It can be from all spheres. So if anyone listening, if you know of a talent that you could think, wow, that person sticks out, so he would be or she would be good to connect with other like-minded people, maybe you could go to ZebrInstitute.com and check out our School of Entrepreneurial Leadership and send us a message to connect with them. We'd love to hear and get in touch as we're recruiting for next year.
Very good.
Excellent. I can't see who is writing here, but see that one is saying so good. That's awesome. I know that you're living in Norway, but you're heading to Brussels. So you can even advertise here. Anybody have a flat in Brussels? You know.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been flying back and forth to Brussels for 20 years or 15, and I'm passionate about it. It's a hub for Europe. It's where you find a lot of young political nerds and leaders, and it's probably the most European city in many ways. But we have not seen this opening of things. We're hitting the wall. So right now we're praying. Do we need to take another few years in Norway before we're moving out? Do we need to? Is God preparing a different place where there are more Europeans than in the tiny town of Tønsberg, Norway? So we're open for God's surprises. But I have to admit a flaw. It's easy for me to run ahead of the Lord. So I am constantly trying to learn to, let him show off here and not me. So maybe he's up to something, but I think our heart is to be in Europe somewhere when we're ready for it. And in any case, we'll continue to work towards Europe and everything we do from here till things open up.
Excellent.
You sound like a true apostle. Entrepreneur, a little bit ahead of God, just wanting to happen. I've never met that in YWAM ever before, I swear.
They might YWAM DNA again. So anyone, send a prayer tonight before you go to bed. This is my biggest problem. Trust the Lord and wait.
Yes.
So would you call yourself a YWAMer?
Absolutely. If you asked me 5 years ago, maybe a little bit of a more unsure YWAMer, because I felt like with some friends, we were hitting on this topic and we didn't have any feedback. We felt the leaders, Lauren Cunningham preaching about the spheres, but nothing happened in reality. So when some YWAM leaders over the last few years have gotten to us and said, can you please help us? We realized you guys had a point. It's easier to feel more involved. And I think maybe that puts a voice to a lot of people out there that probably would have loved to be part of some kind of YWAM entity, but I can't walk around saying I'm YWAM as I'm sitting here in this co-working space with being a part-time consultant and part-time building Zebr Institute. Zebr Institute fits much better. But I can be part of the YWAM tribe and be part of fellowship. So having that network and being part of YWAM makes me feel like a YWAMer, and I would say I am a YWAMer right now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Not that you have to be, but you're playing with even the term potentially a mainstream YWAMer. Somebody working partly outside. So mainstream YWAMer.
Yeah.
By the way, we see that it's Roppe that sent you the arm and the heart online. So thank you, Roppe. I know he's tracking with you as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So what advice do you have for us then right now as YWAM leaders in Europe, to take this next step and to create new tracks, we can say, or new roads, pathways for YWAMers in Europe?
I think in one sense it's a continuation, because as we said, from my perspective, YWAM has been entrepreneurial from its outset. This landscape, Martin Luther talked about it, Calvin talked about it, Abraham Kuyper talked about it. So it's not a new thing. We're not inventing something that is a new thing. But I think in the evangelical world, we're reinventing or experiencing or we're reopening it, and in that respect it's a new path that we need to trail. So then that gives YWAM leaders an opportunity you have a DNA for being pioneers and finding those new trails. But when I did research for a book that we'll talk about afterwards probably, I found that what's called the theology of work and the concept there's been awakening in many circles in the Christian world on faith and work. But most of those guys I talked to said, but there aren't too many examples of what this looked like in the modern times in practical terms. So that's where I think the trail could start with involving people who are God-minded, kingdom-minded in the real world, getting them together and to think, okay, how do we equip the next generation to be better at this than we were? It's like building a new class, building a new school concept. It's just drawing in those experts and then putting in the discipleship DNA that YWAM is already good at. And then out comes a new type of pioneer, I think, that we don't exactly know what will look like, but we don't have to control it. But mixing discipleship with experienced leaders from society will produce some outcome that will maybe guide the way.
Yeah, thank you. Of course, you will have to, in some kind of a way, find out how to both be a movement and organization. That there's some structure, even though we're a very flat structure. There's some structure and leaders all over Europe, as that's a field we are looking at. You will have to find to lead in another way and lead with people out here as well.
It brings me back to a conversation. We're having a learning fellowship with 8 Christian leaders in different denominations in Norway as a pilot to see how this faith and work thinking can be taken into denominations in Norway. And what we discussed was, do we need a revolution? Do we need integration of this, or do we need just to add small bits of it. And I think the verdict was probably in the middle, that we need to really integrate it into the culture. And I think I like what John Mark Comer writes in the book Garden City, because he says we have a dual calling: one, to make disciples, but the second one is to the cultural mandate. And I think because we've lost that, we really need to mess up the curriculum, because we only trained for the one and forgot the other. So there has to be a rebalancing of our curriculum and theology and our cultural expression, I think. And that will take some time, but it might mean a rougher priorities on the input we give when we have a young person for 9 months or 6 months or 3 months. What will he get? That could be a little bit disruptive.
It's actually what we built the entire DTS curriculum on, as we have reframed it to the story of God. So that is a much bigger, but it needs to be fully embraced, I think, because it's actually what we are teaching.
Fantastic.
But probably the penny still needs to drop some places, I think. You mentioned the Garden City, and that's actually the book that we are highlighting this month. So there will also be like a book recommendation later on this month. So yeah, thank you.
Brilliant.
So talking about books, good leaders are good readers, and in reading books inspires us and challenges us, and all the other things in between and above and beyond. What are some books that maybe you've been reading lately or reading right now that you could recommend to us to challenge us and to inspire us?
Well, I think I'm tempted to list up a whole thing, because there are so many good books. But as my book, which was in the process, we'll talk about that maybe afterwards. Maybe a lot of the books that I would recommend will be recommended in that book. But if I was going to choose just maybe 3 books, 2 on these, this is on the Garden City, as mentioned, is definitely a read. That talks more, I feel like it speaks more into the individual's own journey related to faith and work. And then there's Tim Keller's Every Good Endeavor, which gives a more theological overarching, but not a hard read. It's still a pretty easy read, but it's a wonderful holistic look at the kingdom message and the message of what the Bible talks about related to our working life. So that's hugely inspiring. And then I would add maybe a 3rd book on our personal journeys, which for the type that I am, easily burning out and working too hard, is John Mark Comer, again, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which probably many have run into. I think it's probably been the most impactful book that I've read over the last 10 years. And I feel like I need to chew on it and chew it and build in new rhythms. So I can't say I'm a professional yet, but one thing that has changed is that I used to run into all my calendar events, and now I'm giving more space, and then I can run from time to time if I made a mistake, but I don't have to plan for running anymore. I can walk.
That's very good. The book of 2021 here. I think almost everyone on our campus read
Fantastic. So
very good. So with that, running too fast, making some mistakes as a leader, that's a question we ask everyone. What would be maybe one mistake you made and what you learned from that?
I think when I wrote Startup Europe, looking at entrepreneurs around Europe, all the different successful entrepreneurs I talked to said, build the right team, build the right team, and build the right team. That's the number one advice. When we started Skaberkraft, I feel that our team was not strong enough to build as fast and wide as we did, which was partly why I hit the wall and had a burnout. So as we build Zebr this time around, I'm praying for more people to get involved, and I'm trying to not scale faster than we have the capacity for at this round. So that's actually an invitation. If there are people on the YWAM basis around Europe listening to and that they would like to be part of, my kind of deal with Andreas Norley is to use Zebr as a pilot testing ground So we're in YWAM, but we're outside at the same time. So if anyone wants to be part of the journey to make this pilot work, please send us a message and be part of the team. And then I can't scale before I'm looking, especially for a Caleb, a person that would be like-minded, who would feel like building kind of a think tank. But we by calling it an institute, we're a little bit lighter than a think tank. We don't have to produce that much content every week. We can be a bit slower. So building the right team is probably what I didn't do right, and I need to learn to do better this time around.
Very good, very good. There are no
Excellent, very
perfect,
good
there are no well-rounded people, only well-rounded teams, as I learned in my Strength Finders.
And I think, I mean, I know this is a challenge on YWAM basis too, but I think being in this cutting edge space between society, politics, business, and the church and YWAM, there aren't, as we're piloting this, there aren't too many people who are used to being in that space. So it might be harder for us to find the right team, but I think they're out there. Maybe you're listening to right now, so send me an email.
Good.
Oh, that's excellent. You're free to fish here. We do want to hear about your book that you're in the process of writing.
So this then came out in as a Norwegian book in 2019, where the Pentecostal movement, they had their annual leadership conference for 1,500 leaders, and they said, we realize we've been too marginalized in society. We need to look at the role of the church in society. What could I look like? Would you write the conference book this year? So that turned out to a great journey where we looked at models of engagement with society at large, and then we discovered the theology of work and the processes that was going on in different circles around the Christian world. And then in part two, because the Pentecostal movement in Norway was also inspired by Lauren Cunningham, we invited co-writers from the different spheres to tell their journey and their story on how they tried to follow Jesus in different spheres. So I was then challenged by some of the leaders in YWAM Europe to translate the first part, and then we have invited 7 writers from the different spheres around Europe to make this a European edition in English. So it will. I'm just receiving some of those contributions, and they're super exciting reads from Italy and from Sweden and from England. So it's actually going to be, although it's about the same book, it will be in English in a European wrap up, and I'm super excited to share that with YWAM as it's going to be a YWAM book then, but also written for the rest of the church in Europe. So it's due to be launched. Hopefully we get it done by September. So it will be, I'm not pretending for it to be like the Bible on faith and work, but I think it's a good introduction to the topic and how to think more holistically and broader. So I hope it will be, or I'm pretty sure it will be an inspiration to many of you as you get it in the months to come.
Wonderful.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Hermund. This has been a very exciting talk, and just loved hearing more what you're doing. So thank you for taking this time. We will save this talk so people they can go and go to the website, the ELC website, and watch it later as well. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, absolutely. And thank you, Martin, behind the scenes, the tech guy. I think it's your last leadership lounge in this round at least. So thank you. And hope to see you next month. Next month, the topic is dynamic communication. So spread the word and use the resources. Bye-bye.
Bye.